Thank you, Stephen. Good morning to everyone. Thank you for attending. Okay, I just try if the camera is working, just to say hello. Then I think I will remove this so that we can see the slides properly. So it's a pleasure today to make a short presentation of the water cap and trade project. The project was coordinated by BRGM, and it was conducted by 6 partners from Spain, France, and Italy. So in Spain, we had 2 partners, SEGRAM, a research center from the Polytechnic University of Madrid, University of Cordoba, and an associated partner, which is the University Politécnica de Cartagena. In France, we had IRSTEA, which is formerly called CEMAGREF, Research Center for Environmental and Agricultural Research. Acteon, a small consultancy specialized in environmental economics, and the University of Bologna from Italy. 2 of our colleagues, Fabian Carvarec from Acteon and Alberto Garrido and Dolores Rey, as well as Javier, are also attending the meeting today. So they will probably add a few things at the end to complement my presentation, which is going to be very brief. And they will also be able to speak if the microphone is solved, problem is solved on both sides, to answer some of your questions if they are too technical for me. So it's a bit challenging to present a 4 years project with all these partners in 25 minutes. So I'm just going to try to make a brief overview of what we have done, highlighting the key research questions and the main research results which have been obtained in the different case studies. And then we are, of course, open to further discussion, including by email to answer your question or provide more information. Okay, I see someone cannot see me, but anyhow, it does not really matter. I'm going to stop the camera, so and just continue the. Okay, good. Okay, just one word as well about the project has just ended, and I'm just currently finalizing the final report, which will be available on the website very soon. We also had a seminar, a European seminar on water markets, which was organized in February in Paris. The proceedings of this seminar are also available on the website. So I will disseminate this through this information through the project website, I think, or I can send it to Stefan so he can circulate as well. Okay, so my presentation will be organized like this. Following a brief introduction about water markets, I will make a short presentation of the project objectives and components, and I will just focus on 2 main parts or results. The first part is about the work which was done to model the potential gains from developing water markets in various case studies. And the second part is more the results of our analysis looking at barriers to the development of water markets, trying to understand why there could be some reluctances to develop water trade in the countries where we've been working. Then some conclusions and recommendations about our perception of the potential of these economic instruments for water policy in Europe in the coming years. So about the context, I think the starting point of our thinking is that we have an increasing number of river basins which are moving towards full closure of the basin, which means that water resources are fully allocated. So this is already the case in Spain for quite some time. This is progressively happening in France and Italy, and probably in other southern European countries. So water is fully allocated to users, but the allocation is based on administrative rationing procedures, basically quotas, which can be based on historical water rights. So the cap is currently being implemented in these river basins, but without considering the economic efficiency of allocation and the marginal value of water in the different uses. This administrative rationing procedure may prevent the entry of new users, which are potentially more efficient than existing users, and is first source of inefficiencies. So the starting point is that we think that reallocation procedures are needed, and there are different ways to do it, and water trading is one option, not the only one, but it's one option, along with water pricing and more participatory self-governing approaches. So we focus on water trading as one option, being fully aware that there are other things that deserve being studied, other instruments that deserve being studied. Okay, so the project was basically about trying to imagine or design water market scenarios, considering the fact that water markets can deal with different types of resources: groundwater, surface water, water stored in reservoirs, or just water flowing in rivers. That the object of a transfer can be different. It can be full property rights. We have a few examples in the case of Spain. It can just be volumes which are associated to temporary administrative authorizations. Markets can also differ in terms of type of users involved. We have cases of exchanges of water within agriculture, or between agriculture and urban water users, or between industry and agriculture. The spatial extent of trading can be very different, ranging from very local water markets or exchanges to large distance interbasin transfers. And our Spanish partners have studied the case of the interbasin transfer between Tajo and Segura, which is more than 300 kilometers, about 300 kilometers distance. Then markets can differ in terms of temporality. We can exchange permanent, there can be permanent water transfers or water right transfers. They can be spot temporary trades. They also differ in terms of the characteristics of water rights, in the organization of a structure of a market, which includes the role given by the government. So there's a large range of possible institutional arrangements that should be considered when talking about water markets. Water market is not a unique mechanism. It has to be declined, or it has to be illustrated, or with different type of possible scenarios. So one of the interesting features of a project is that one of the country participating in the project actually has a real experience about water markets, because water trading is officially allowed in Spain since the 1999 water law. Alberto and colleagues will correct if it was already allowed before, but at least the law has really set legal foundations for developing water markets. There were some public purchase or public buybacks by the water agency to farmers for environmental purposes in drought years. There are some formal and informal water markets already existing within agriculture. There are markets taking place with interbasin, using interbasin transfer infrastructures, and there are also exchanges or markets between agriculture and urban users in the south of Spain. So there's already a practice that can help designing scenarios with reference to things that happen in Europe, and not only in the States or in Australia. So it's more or less in the same legal context, which is very interesting for discussing the issue in countries like France and Italy. Now, the main questions we wanted to address in the projects were the following. The first one, on which we produced quite a lot of results, was related to the estimation or the assessment of the benefits of establishing water markets. What are the benefits? How much can we gain in economic terms from increasing the flexibility in allocation and allowing voluntary exchanges between users? So this was addressed in different case studies using different methods. So in France and Italy, two of our partners, Acteon and Unibo, developed some farm economic models to simulate the economic gains that would be associated to the possibility to exchange water rights between farmers within irrigation systems. So different type of models, but I will just come back a bit later on this. In Spain, the Cartagena and the Madrid University together worked on the analysis of the gains associated to the development of an option contract between farmers located in the Tajo basin and those located in the Segura basin. So basically their work focuses a lot on the uncertainty associated to the water supply and the risk run by farmers in that uncertain context. So I'll try to come back as well on this one. In the southern Guadalquivir basin in southern Spain, University of Cordoba developed a very different approach to simulate the potential demand and supply curves for water rights in hypothetical water markets using stated preference methods. Basically, they conducted a survey with farmers, asking them what would be their willingness to sell water for different prices in different hydrological and meteorological conditions, and what would be their willingness to buy water. And so based on the answers to the questionnaires, they developed these water demand curves and water supply curves and simulated how the market could function if it was established in this area. And finally, in France, we developed together with Javier Calatrava in the University of Cartagena, we developed a model to simulate the potential for water trading between municipalities or between urban water utilities in the context of growing water demand. And there we developed a cost minimization model, which I will also present quickly. So basically, all these studies were trying to estimate the potential economic gains associated with the establishment of water markets or establishment of a framework allowing users to exchange water on a market. And the objective was also to simulate what would be the volume that could be traded on the market. Is it marginal or is it significant? And what would be the equilibrium price on the market? Now we all shared the same concern about the fact that economic models are generally very optimistic in terms of simulation, or when we use economic models to estimate the potential for water market, we often find that there is a large potential and there are large gains. But when you look in practice in countries where water markets have been established, like Spain, Australia, Chile, it happens, or we just can see that the intensity of transaction is not as high as it could be expected if you look at the results of models. So the question is why? And there are evidences from the cases of Spain, Australia, Chile, that the successful or not successful development of water markets depends very much on the attitudes of agents involved in such markets, in particular farmers. And there may be many reasons explaining why farmers and other participants are not willing to participate, although it would be economically efficient to do so. So the question was, the objective was to analyze the perception of stakeholders and farmers of perception of water markets as an instruments, and understand what are the barriers to trade. And this was done using surveys, focus groups, focusing on different type of publics like farmers, stakeholders, but also the lay public. And this was implemented in the three countries, in France, Italy, and Spain. Last but not least, we also conducted, in particular in France, some activities to understand the perception of water markets against other economic instruments. There are different possibilities, different possible economic instruments that can be used to improve the allocation of water within sector or across sectors. And we wanted to see how the other instruments were perceived by stakeholders and compare that to the perception of water market. And this was done through scenario workshops, which I will quickly present at the end. So that's the overall presentation of the project objectives and activities. Can you just confirm everyone is hearing me? Because, yes?
Certainly clear from my side, working very well.
Okay. So just a few words about the case studies. Okay, yes comes from everywhere. Almost. Okay. The case studies, very quickly, we have two case studies in the south of Spain. I mentioned them already. We have two small case studies very close to each other in Italy. And then in France, we had one large case study where many activities were conducted, which was in the Marais Poitevin in western France. Then one on which we worked on urban water use in southern France. And then we have 5 small case studies on which we focused on the development of Jean-Louis, you cannot see me. That's normal. My camera is off, so no one can see me. So the 5 case studies in focusing on groundwater, where we specifically look at the possibility to develop groundwater markets. Now, we first look at the results of economic modeling approaches. So I'll be very quick. I'm a bit sorry for it. I'll be very quick for each case studies, although there was a lot of modeling work, so it's a bit difficult. Do not hesitate at the end to ask me for the name of a contact. You can also find this on the internet website, so you can access to documents and possibly discuss with them with the authors about to get more information. So the first case study in Italy, in the Ravenna province, the authors focused on the slides will be on the internet at the end. Yes. So the first case study in Italy focused on a specific situation where you have farmers who have jointly invested in the construction of small reservoirs, and there can be some possibility of reallocating water stored in these small private reservoirs from one farmer to another. So they simulated a bit what could be the gains associated with increasing the flexibility in water allocation for this type of small irrigation system depending on small reservoir. The starting point of the story was that they noticed that informal voluntary exchanges were already existing, and that there were officially no monetary compensations, and that the exchanges were supervised by the irrigation board. So they simulated a scenario in which there would be full flexibility to exchange water during the season between farmers within the system, in order to try to assess what would be the gain in terms of gross margin per hectare. So the two curves show the situation, the gross margin without trade in green and with trade in red, with different levels of water scarcity on the x-axis. And basically the main conclusion of this study is that there would be limited economic gains, like 3% of gross margin increase, and that the volumes of water which would be exchanged would be like 7%. So trade could improve, but only marginally. That's the first case study. The second case study is very similar, conducted by Actéon in Marais Poitevin, focusing on a region where agriculture is focusing on agricultural water use. And so they developed economic farm models using linear programming models, and they also simulated what could be the improvement in terms of total gross margins of the farming sector if free trade was allowed. Here again, they show that the economic gains are not so significant, less than 10%, although they simulate that potentially there would be 1/3 of the total volume that could be traded, and that the price would reach 60 cents per cubic meter, which is quite high, and probably a good indication of a marginal value of water in the sector. Then, of course, the model could be used to simulate how the market could change with increased water scarcity in the future. So the models are, of course, allowing simulation to explore different scenarios. So that's the second case study. The third case study is a bit different, conducted by Madrid University and Cartagena in the Tajo-Segura interbasin transfer. So the transfer is currently regulated by strict regulations, and the idea was to investigate how to change the rules that determines the possibility to transfer water from the one basin to the other one using this big infrastructure, and in particular the gains that could be obtained through the establishment of option contracts signed between irrigation boards or farmers in the Tajo basin, where water is a bit more abundant, and on the other side, which would be the seller, and on the other side in the Segura basin, farmers or irrigation boards, which would be the buyers. So basically, what the study focuses on the stochastic aspect of a risk dimension of water location, and what the modeling shows is that without the option contract mechanism and the flexibility which is associated to it, there is a significant risk. That's the blue curve. There's a significant probability of obtaining very low value in the basin. While if you include the new mechanism, transfer mechanism, you reduce this probability of having very low value in drought years. So you reduce the risk. I will, if the microphone is working, I will leave my colleagues add a few things at the end if they want to say more about this thing. So basically, here the market is analyzed as a tool to mitigate risks and not to improve structural allocation. The fifth case study, which I already mentioned, was conducted in the Guadalquivir. So it was based on a farm survey. More than 200 farmers were interviewed in the Guadalquivir basin and in the southern Andalusia catchment, which could be the buyers. Many questions were asked, including willingness to pay, willingness to accept, or willingness to buy, willingness to sell water. And this was used to construct water demand, water supply curves, just illustrated on the slide. So you can see a few values of willingness to pay in euro per cubic meter in the different basins. Basically, in the Guadalquivir, farmers are more willing to. I mean, the transfer would be from Guadalquivir to Almeria, and the equilibrium price is estimated between 0.17 to 0.40 in basin, or you don't allow it, and depending on the fact that it's a drought year or not a drought year. So this is another type of methodology that was used to simulate ex ante the potential economic gains associated to the development of water markets, but including somehow the perception of farmers, because when they declare they are willing to participate or not, you already include the issue of perception and acceptability in the modeling of the markets. Very quickly, the last case study in southern France, close to the city of Montpellier. The subject was, or the issue, the context is that we are in a region with growing water demand. So we estimated future water demand due to growing population for 2030. And we assume that a system of quota, so the cap, would be implemented in the region by allocating a water quota to each municipality based on different criteria, and that if the municipality was consuming more than its quota, it should implement water conservation measure or purchase water from another utility. So basically, we simulated the market between water utilities. The model is based on a cost minimization approach, considering hydrological constraints in the basin. The results show that the equilibrium price would be around 0.5 to 1 cubic meter in the two basins, different situation in the two basins. That the market would allow reducing the total cost of water supply by 25%. And that the volume that could be traded between municipalities would be around 40%. So it looks like there's quite a big potential, but we did not include any transaction costs. So of course this would significantly reduce the benefits and the intensity of the transactions. And we also did not study the acceptability constraints, because there would obviously be some reluctance from elected people at the municipal level to participate in such a water market, which is still considered as very far from the current philosophy of water policy in France. So that's with the modeling. Now, if we look a bit at the second part of the results, which is barriers to trade. as I said before, we really wanted to investigate a bit farmers' attitude, because we strongly believe that this can determine the successful development of water markets or not, and there are evidences from different countries. So we conducted different type of activities, qualitative surveys, focus groups, and scenario workshops in different case studies, focusing on farmers, more or less stakeholders, including representatives from different sectors, and also citizens, a bit to get the perception of lay people on this type of instrument. The main findings in Spain, France, and Italy are the following in terms of barriers. The first barrier is strategic behavior. We found evidences that many potential participants to water market would prefer to maintain lobbying activities to put pressure on government to increase new resources or increase the cap before accepting to enter to a water market. It's especially in France, people are saying that the problem is not how to share scarcity, the problem is to reduce scarcity by increasing water and not leaving all this water in winter going to the sea because it's wasted. So we need to create new resources, and we need to reduce environmental constraints to increase the total volume which is allocated to water use, and then only then we can discuss about modifying allocation, possibly using water markets. So the current political debate is around the cap, and it's too early to talk about reallocation as long as the cap problem is not solved. So that's the first barrier. The second barrier is obviously ethic. In France and Italy in particular, but I think to a certain extent in Spain as well, water is really considered, because it's written in the law, as a public trust. So moving towards reallocating water through market mechanisms is quickly assimilated to merchandization of a natural good, and then to privatization, because people feel that as soon as you allow people to sell their water rights, you increase the feeling of private appropriation of the resource, which is not a private property. So market is assimilated to merchandization, which is assimilated to privatization, and there's a strong rejection of this. Another strong problem, which has an ethical dimension, is the rejection by farmers of the idea of cutting the link between water and land. Water allocation should be attached to the land, and there's a strong opposition to cut this link, which was historical. The third one is barrier, which is related to the fact that market mechanisms are perceived as possibly increasing problems of social justice. In many countries, in France in particular, there are discussions about the fact that initial allocation is not fair. And if you give the possibility to the beneficiaries of water quotas to sell it, you strengthen illegitimate rents. So the market mechanism is accentuating an unfair initial allocation, which is one reason why people would reject it. Fourth barrier is a problem of definition of water rights. In France and Italy in particular, we still have very much insecure water rights. They are not enforced. We still have a lot of metering problems, so you don't check that everyone is complying with this quota. Furthermore, you also have still irrigation bans, which is, if I'm buying a water right, I still run the risk that the administration will just promulgate an irrigation water ban at some point of the season, so I will lose my right. And finally, there's still a risk for water buyers and sellers related to the fact that if you don't use your water right, you might lose it. So if you don't use it because you want to sell it, you take the risk that the administration takes it back from you, and this is going to reduce willingness to participate in markets. The fifth problem is transparency, or the functioning of the market. There will still be some transparency problem, asymmetric negotiation powers between sellers and buyers, and many people fear that speculation takes place in river basins. Sixth barrier is the the fear that trade is going to generate environmental impacts, You cannot move around water like this in our systems, and this is particularly strong, I think, in France and Italy, because we do not have the infrastructure which Spain has in terms of storage and possibility to transfer water and regulate the system. And this is particularly strong if you look at groundwater systems, for instance, because you cannot stop pumping in one part of the aquifer and increase pumping on the other part without having impact on rivers which are depending on groundwater, for instance. So the negative externalities associated to the transfer can be very strong, and this is generating a strong opposition from people to the idea of water markets. And last but not least, we heard a lot of things about the fact that the development of markets for water allocation is going to lead to a concentration of water rights in certain territories and with the better off farms, which is going to raise some social issue and some issues of development of territories. Also, but it's going to increase competition between farmers and maybe kill the little solidarity that still exists in rural areas. So market, meaning competition, is something that goes against social solidarity, which is a strong value in agriculture. So this is a bit a summary of the main barriers to trade which we found in the different case studies. The three first one on the left somehow refer to the preconditions to water trading which are not met. So, okay. And on the right side, it's more things that have to be considered to design appropriate water trading mechanisms when we think about future scenarios for water markets. I think I skip this one because I'm a bit too long. I just finished with an illustration of, okay, we cannot, our idea is that we cannot just talk about water market without considering other options. We are just entering into the beginning of what some authors have called a mature water economy. We start to implement in France and Italy, we start to implement the cap, and water used to be considered like a free access good. It's now a limited access good, and we have to implement some allocation procedures and possibly reallocation procedures. But we are just at the beginning of a process, again, at least in France and Italy. And if you start talking only about water markets at this stage, it gives the impression that you are defending a ideology, and there are many other ways to think about allocation and reallocation. So what we did in France was to discuss different scenarios, one of which was water quotas, with farmers and stakeholders in different case study. Basically, the three scenarios we discussed are the following. The first one was considering a system in which you charge a tax for farmers exceeding their quota, and you provide a subsidy to farmers using less than the quota, and you combine the two systems so that you can reach a balanced, an equilibrium in terms of water resources and a financial equilibrium. The second system was relying more on establishing self-governing arrangements at local level, saying we give you a total water volume to a group of farmers, and you sign a joint liability contract by which you are jointly liable to meet the objective, but then you can share it as you want among yourself. And the third scenario was water tradable, the development of tradable quotas. This was discussed in 5 regions in France through workshops. We used fake press releases to present this, the scenarios, and quickly I'm just presenting some of the findings in terms of preferences expressed by participants to the different scenarios. There was a strong preference to the joint liability contract, which is more referring to institutional arrangements through which users organize themselves to manage the system. With a limited state intervention and with no market instruments involved in it. The current system, which is administrative quota, was then the second preferred scenario. And the two scenarios which really include economic instruments, the tradable quota and the tax and subsidy, were rejected by the participants. So this is just to show that there's still a long way to do before implementing in practice economic instruments, because we are only living an era where water was considered as a free access good and entering a new era where initial allocation is just being done, and reallocation is a complex issue to be understood by people. Just a word of conclusion, because I'm already very long. In terms of policy recommendation, maybe we can give this to leave it to the discussion. So if our colleagues can talk about this for Spain, because they're here. For France, just a few things. Again, I would insist on the fact that we first have to work on the cap. There's a lot of work to do to define the maximum volume that can be abstracted in the reef basins, fix a ceiling, monitor water withdrawal, because if you are not able to meter water use, you cannot establish water rights and you cannot establish a trade. So we are far behind the situation which are described in Australia or in the US and in some part of Spain. The second point is that in France and Italy, again, we have to create water rights, which means changing or removing priorities. Drinking water as a full priority over agriculture, which means that agriculture is suffering from restrictions in case of water shortage, so they would be expropriated in terms of water rights. So water markets can be an option for the long term, but it will take time to implement this type of tools. Keep in mind that there are very strong societal barriers to overcome before this type of tool can enter the policy. And that in any case, environmental constraints will significantly restrict the potential for reallocation, because unlike Australia, unlike Spain, we do not have the storage and transfer infrastructure that can allow moving water from one place to another without generating third-part impact. And groundwater is an extreme case in which I think the potential for water market is going to be very much constrained by environmental limits, meaning that the potential for reallocation of water is very limited. Thank you very much. Been a bit long. Stephen, it's up to you now.
Okay, thank you very much, Jean-Daniel. Don't worry about being a bit long. It was a very rich presentation, very interesting. And I hope there's plenty of questions to come. I certainly have lots of things to raise. Before I do that, just to all the participants, if you look up at the top bar, you'll find a little person with a raised hand. If you go down, you can see applause, which comes up on the right-hand side as you see on the attendee list. So if you wish to show your appreciation for a very good presentation from Jean-Daniel, a round of applause. There we go. People found it. Thank you very much. Now we're going to try and pass over to Alberto and Dolores, if they're going to talk about Spain and some of the case studies. We had a problem with the microphone, so we'll now try and test that, ask them to speak, and then they can give the conclusions from Spain and a little bit from their case studies. So we'll give that a go. Okay, Alberto. No, we're not hearing anything at the moment.
Can you shift Javier Calatrava from the participants to the presenters? Maybe his microphone will be working.
Okay. We've done that.
Javier, can you try just connect your microphone on the top?
On the top menu bar, you see meeting, layouts, pods, audio. You have a little speaker, a little microphone. You need to click on that so it's green to activate it. Ah, yes.
Maybe in the meantime we can take a first round of questions.
Yes, so the options are, if you have a microphone and you can get it working, not always the case, you can pose the questions, or on the chat. You can write the questions. As you can see, the chat is going there. The questions can, and we will just basically, as they're written, as we read them, we will respond to them. But I also have one question. Oh, so there's one from Jean-Louis Jeanne. I'll leave that to Jean-Daniel to answer that question. Defining CAP as an acronym.
I was talking without the microphone. CAP is not an acronym. I'm sorry, I did not define it. The idea is to define the ceiling. The cap is, we first have to cap, to seal, to impose a ceiling on the maximum volume of water that can be used. Once the total water that can be used, and this is what I'm referring to cap or capping, once we have defined the maximum ceiling, then we can talk about how to share it and how to reallocate it. This is also used in CO2 emissions. For example, you say, okay, we just define the maximum quantity of CO2 that we want to emit, it's the cap. Then you allocate the permits of polluting, and then you allow polluters to reallocate or sell and buy the permits from one to each other. So it's a bit the same idea. Before establishing market in water, you need to say how much water can be used, then allocate this water to the individuals, and then you can reallocate it. And the problem is in France is, for example, we are only working on the definition of a maximum amount of water that can be used. And this is it's going to take time before we agree on that. And once we agree on that, we have to share it between users. And once we agree on the sharing between users, we can suggest implement a mechanism to reallocate.
It seems to me a very long process, that. I mean, do you have a time scale? Do you think that all that could happen?
Yes, I'm speaking more, it's my vision for the case of France. The situation is probably different in Spain, because Spain is in a different, I mean, if you take this time schedule, Spain is far ahead because water scarcity is much higher, because the legal framework has evolved quite some time ago, 1999, and because informal water trade has already happened in the past. And the cap, or the identification of this maximum volume that can be used in the different basins, is well estimated for decades, because the system is very much artificialized in a way due to the storage capacity. So we are not in the same. We are along this timeline. We are in different locations, and it's going to take a lot of time before we can really think of implementing water markets in France. I think the answer would be a bit the same in Italy. Our colleagues are not here, but they share a bit this view. It's probably an interesting tool to improve water use efficiency, but it's much too early to think about it.
Okay, we have interesting questions there from Lorenzo. I think there's two that can be taken together. Have you considered in the project ecological gains other than economic, and also social gains? For example, guaranteeing urban water supply under drought and water scarcity conditions.
So one of the choice of a project was really to focus on the economic dimension only. So we really looked at the instrument from an economic perspective. So concerning the first part of the question, we did not really look at ecological gains, because I think we looked at it in the other way, like improving economic efficiency through trading, which allows reallocating water from places where water has a low marginal value to places where water has a high marginal value, may generate not economic gains, not ecological gains, but ecological negative impacts. Again, if the trade leads to the concentration of water abstraction in a specific part of an aquifer, you're going to improve groundwater depletion in this specific part. You may generate seawater intrusion in this specific part because of a concentration of water rights. So we looked more at ecological risks associated to trade than ecological gains. However, I think the case of Spain is interesting. If you take the case of Ruca Basin, and I think the Segura, but I know it less, in the Ruca Basin, the water agency has used the market instruments to buy back water rights from farmers in drought years in order to improve the ecological conditions of a river. So here the market was used to improve or to reach ecological gains, as you mentioned. But we did not really did any research work on this buyback issue. Just notice, I just would like to say that this is also used in Australia, for example. Buyback programs have been used in different places so it's a way to use markets for generating environmental gains. Now, what you mentioned in your social gain question, guaranteeing urban water supply under drought, this is basically the idea of the option contract, using the market as a way to cope with risk of drought. So you agree in advance on the fact that the city is going to buy water from farmers or compensate waters for not using their water in drought years, and this prevents the city from constructing desalination plant, for example. So it's a win-win situation. We looked at it from an economic perspective, not really from a social perspective, but the gain is really economic in that case, I think. I think my colleagues from Spain could probably add things, but I'm not sure the microphone is working. Am I answering to your question, Lorenzo? Okay.
And if people want to respond, yes, there's also with the applause you can agree, disagree. There are easy ways of responding.
Javier Alberto, the microphone is still not working.
Oh, was that something from Alberto? I'm not sure. There's a microphone that came up there. But I've got a question whilst we're looking at that. You mentioned that agriculture, farmers are, it's the key industry in making water trading work. And I was wondering, why do you feel that is? I mean, is it the political power that agriculture has in many areas, or is it based on their actual demand, as a key user of the water? It's also linked, I found it interesting, as later on you said that agriculture are very much against, as an industry, the farmers are against the separation of water and land. It's something I personally agree with. I think it'd be difficult to try and separate the ecological, environmental aspect of the water, which is something I agree with, but I also think that agriculture sometimes has a little too much political power in that sense.
Okay, I'm answering. I was looking at the other question at the same time, so I missed a bit your first question. I'm answering to the second one, and I might ask you to repeat the first. The opposition to farmers to the water trading mechanism is not an opposition, is not a political opposition or a formal position from a farm lobby or politically organized lobby. It's very much what we are reporting on is very much the perception of individual farmers. So we focused on individual farmers because they are the people who might participate or not participate in the market once the mechanism is established. And we really try to disentangle the different motivations behind this strong rejection, which is a bit the slide in which I try to show the 6 or 7 motivations or barriers to trade. So it was more individual positioning of farmers towards the mechanism than a political one. And sorry, I missed your first part of the question. First question, Stefan.
I think you've answered it there, and since it's I was interested in looking at why farmers are against it and what is their motivation. Is it an actual through the demand or political power? I think you've answered that very well. We can see there's a few more questions coming through there.
Okay, concerning the priority, I think the current system of priority is very much different in the different countries. In France, we have a clear priority to drinking water, I would say, then environment, and then if environment allocation is not met, then the government is implementing some restrictions, so agriculture has the lowest level of priority. Things are a bit different in Spain, where it's much more formalized with a notion of guarantee, in which the plan is designed, water management plan is designed in such a way that urban water supply should be guaranteed with a 90% probability, and so the notion of probability is included, so it's much more formalized in Spain. In the work we did, well, I can't answer for Spain, I'm sorry, but in the work we did in France and Italy, we focused on the possibility to reallocate water within agriculture. So we did not discuss this issue of priority. But it should be discussed as soon as you talk about reallocating water from agriculture to urban use. I would say that if you want to establish reallocation and a market mechanism, you have to suppress this priority system. Although some markets do function with priority systems in America, for example. But so that's for the question of Jean-Louis. Then I think we have some explanation from Alberto. So well, I'm really sorry that I have to speak and you can't. I think in the case of UPM, yeah, in the case of Taro Segura, the option market was used the other way round that I was explaining in the case of cities and agriculture. In that the option contract is about how farmers in the Tahoe Basin would sell water to farmers in the Segura Basin in case there is too much water in the basin. Okay, so it's an option which is planned for using extra water whenever extra water is available. In other cases, like in America, in California, you have option contract where, on the contrary, the city is saying, in case of a drought, I will pay the farmer for not using the water and just not irrigating the crops because I need the water first, and I'm going to compensate you very much. So the option can be related to extra water in high flow years or low flow years in other cases. So I think it's probably what Alberto wanted to say.
And then we have it as from Jocelyn. Sorry, my question is not directly related to trading, but a comparison of different instruments. And he asks about coming back to a previous slide, but I'm not sure of the slide. Do you understand the slide that he is asking for? Comparison of different instruments. Is that the right one? Yes. Okay. Oh, yeah. The question is on its way. The difference between farmers and stakeholders' views on joint liability contract and tradable quotas. I'm not sure if you are responding, Jean-Daniel, or are you still reading?
No, sorry, I was responding without a microphone. It's better like this. So the difference is very interesting because the joint liability contract is a system in which you say you transfer the responsibility of sharing water to farmers. So you transfer the responsibility to them, saying we give you full flexibility, but you are jointly liable to report to us that you meet the objective. Farmers are a bit reluctant to this because they say, okay, there are always black sheep in a head, and what do we do in case 10% of our farmers do not want to comply? Do we have sanctioning power? And they are reluctant to take over this responsibility. The benefits associated to increased flexibility do not compensate the risk that conflict arise within the group of farmers. So that's why only 38% of the farmers agree with these systems. They have some fears. On the other side, stakeholders, which include state agency, are very happy with this because they say, okay, you are big guys, you are, you are responsible. We trust you. We give you responsibility. Find your way to share it. In case there's a problem, we just have one person to talk to, the Farmers Association. The way you solve the problem is not our problem, but if you don't solve it, you will get a heavy fine. So it makes things much easier for stakeholders, for government agencies, because they say, we give you higher consideration, we trust you, and then we don't have the problem we don't have responsibility of talking to hundreds of farmers. We just have one association to talk to, so it's much more convenient for us. It's a bit my understanding of the difference.
I've got a message from Javier. Is this Alberto?
Can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay. So now we can respond to any question or make any comments if you feel that anything that Jean-Daniel said wasn't clear or you require some other further elaboration on our case study.
Okay, excellent.
Now, I'd like just to add an additional note to what he said. There is quite a consensus, right, in Spain right now that the water law should be reformed because water rights are defined in a way and with an approach towards giving water permissions when there was not water market going on. So the water rights were defined in a situation where trading was not allowed. And now we're using those kind of rights definitions to allow for trading. So this is one of the things that have to be reformed and introduce a much better regulation. And that certainly will be one of the focus of water law reform. With respect to the Tahoe's Segura transfer, our idea was to increase supply reliability and to also propose a change of management structure of the Segura Basin. I'd like to also respond to one of the questions that were raised in the chat. Yes, environmental flows are a restriction. They're not considered uses in Spain. So right now, the Tahoe's available resources for transfer are those that first met the user's demand of the Tahoe's basin, the environmental flows requirements, and the international commitment that Spain has with Portugal with respect to the Tahoe's flows at the border. So if there's more water available, that would be the volume that could be traded. So please, if you have any question or you want to raise any question, we can answer now.
Okay, I would also like to try and pass over to Javier. I noticed that his microphone was working as well, if he wants to add anything.
You hear me okay? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
I would like just to, I mean, Alberto has just commented most of what I was going to say. I would like to make some comments on the perception and the acceptability of farmers in Spain. When the law was reformed 15 years ago to allow water trading, some studies that these surveys on farmers have found a great reluctance from farmers in general, and especially from irrigation districts, which are the main agricultural users in Spain, about markets, especially with the fear of losing the concession and making visible that they may not need the water. But in these 15 years, there have been some experiences and some large experiences of water trading, and the irrigation districts and the farmer have seen that selling the water on a specific year to some other user that might need it, not selling the right permanently, but just in drought period, selling the right is not the problem. That they don't lose their concession, that they have benefit, then even the public administration help them in that process. So that has probably change the negative perception that farmers have initially when the law was reformed about selling the water. Of course, farmers there is more demand, especially in some areas for buying water for agricultural uses, especially horticulture and high value uses, than for selling. I mean, there is a restriction on the supply side of farmers willing to sell. But I think that the perception of the dangers that entering the market as sellers have are being dissipated, are disappearing as long as just as an example, we talk about some market experiences between the Tajo and the Segura in the 2005-2008 drought. Now that we have a new drought, there are new agreements being reached between farmers in the Tajo and farmers in the Segura, and the number of participating districts in the Tajo is greater than 5-6 years ago, than in the previous drought. So that there are more irrigation districts willing to sell their water to the Segura, not permanently, but just for this period of drought. And that's all I wanted to add. I don't know if you hear me.
That was good. Thank you very much. We've now passed our allocation. I said that we'll try and make this last an hour, but certainly if people wish to stay and carry on discussing, you're more than welcome to continue. I know that some of you may need to leave at a certain time, but as long as the questions are going, I will stay and host. I see we've got another one from Jean-Louis Janin, which has arrived. So. To Alberto, okay.
Yeah, can I ask the question raised by Jean-Louis?
Yes, over to you.
Okay, his question is about how do water rights and water allocations are separated in the case of Spain. Now, this is an interesting question because it is one of the main differences with the type of regulation that markets have in Australia. In Spain, we only have formal water rights. We don't have formal water allocations. That means farmer users have a water right. In theory, entitles this person or agent to a certain amount of water. But sometimes, very often, allocations could be smaller than the water right indicates formally. So you trade a water allocation, that means you're trading an announced amount. That's for an annual water market. So you can trade your water right for perpetuity, or for the time that the right is standing. But if it's a water allocation, you don't have any formal title that allows you to trade that. You're just given the permission to trade your allocation, and that's based on current availability in reservoirs, rivers. Okay, so so we only have one type of formal water trading, and that is with water rights. Water allocations are formal as well, but you don't trade anything that is really stated in a formal document. It is a permission based on the current availability. Whereas in Australia, they have both kinds of definitions, and they're formally identified, water rights and water allocation. We don't have that kind of distinction in the way Australia does it. Yes, we wrote a chapter for a book on water markets, so we can share it with you. Just let us know. We will write in the chat a formal an email address, so you can write us, and we could send you we could send you the publication.
Okay. Following on from that, I had do you have any understanding of the experience in Australia where they are trading on the allocations? Do you think it works, or does it have problems?
I think it is much better, their system, than ours, because water rights were defined maybe 25, 30 years ago, and those amounts are not relevant now. They're not realistic. So farmers usually have a much lower allocation, although the water rights says that they have whatever amount. So it would be really advisable, and we are proposing that as a recommendation, really to define water allocations based on the situation prevailing in a given year, not based on what is stated in the water right that, as I said, was issued many years ago. So it is much more realistic to have those kind of formal definitions of water uses, and allow the annual or temporary or seasonal trading based on the water allocation, rather than just a formal public announcement. So I think the Australian regulation is much better than ours in this sense.
Okay, thank you very much. If we don't have any further questions, I know that we need to finish up before 11:30. So if we don't have any further questions, I would certainly like to say thank you to Jean-Daniel for the presentation, but also to colleagues for adding at the end a little bit more from the case studies and experience in Spain. Also, thank you to the participants for listening and being here. Certainly this presentation is being recorded and will be available, like the other presentations, the webinars, online on the Office of Water website, along with the PowerPoint as well, so you can get all the information there. And certainly the contact and the websites for the project will allow you to pose questions to any of the partners, and if you want to go into more detail about what you've heard today. Are we going to be able to connect with Fabien? So have an opportunity for the last questions. We've got a few minutes before we need to close. So if there are any final things, now is your opportunity. Okay, if everyone's happy, I'll wish you all a good weekend. Thank you all for listening, and we'll maybe see some of you next Thursday for the Impact Project, for those of you who are interested.
Can you just give a title of a project? It's about climate change, or?
Impact was about biological modeling on rivers. I will have to remind myself of the details. I'm going to get the information here. Yeah. Developing an integrated model to predict abiotic habitat conditions and biota of rivers for application in climate change research and water management. So related to climate change, but very much about modeling abiotic habitat conditions. Focusing on macroinvertebrates and fish. And they are in a similar situation as the project is finished, and they are in the process of writing their final report. So the results are available and can be disseminated now. And that'll be at 3 o'clock Paris time next Thursday.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much to everyone, and bye-bye.
Okay, goodbye to everybody.